president of here! I voted for you! Wait a minute. That guy on the grassy knoll's got a gun. He's gonna shoot the president. Holy smokes, I've got to do something. All right, Lee. Time to become an American hero.
Indianapolis Media proudly present to you the Lone Gunman Podcast with your host, Rob Clark, where research comes to shine and myths comes to die. Stay tuned, be right there.
That was my concept.
And then he went in part.
And then he went in part, right.
That's right.
Now, that's my concept.
That's right.
But I didn't see any of it. I can't say because I wasn't eyewitness to it. But he put him out in the bag. He's always put him out. Now, you said he only rode with him on weekend. He rode with him every day.
Really?
Monday through Friday.
Really? Mm-hmm. We didn't know that.
And he would bring him. But he would let him out in the back door. That's what I'm going to tell you.
That's right.
He would let him out and come in the back together.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is your boy Rob Clark. This is the Lone Gunman Podcast, and this is the 100th episode. Thank you. Please. Thank you very much. You're too kind. Thank you. I guess now I can be syndicated, right? I'm 100 episodes in. I guess you kind of need a network for that, huh? And I'm not on one. But it's all good. You still love me, right? What's up? Welcome to the show. This is the 100th episode of the Lone Gunman Podcast. I never thought I would get this far, but here we are. And I wanted to bring you a big-time guest today, for the 100th episode. But I kind of got stonewalled. I got the cold shoulder. So guess what? You're stuck with me. And just me. Now, the clip you heard at the top of the show is actually from a different show. The Real Deal. Jim Fetzer's show. And you might be saying, Rob, what in the hell are you doing playing Jim Fetzer stuff on your show? Well, even the sun shines on a dog's ass every once in a while. And sometimes, when you're sifting through that big pile of cow dung, you can find a beautiful, pristine piece of corn, nestled in all that crap every once in a while. And, I'll give credit where credit's due. They tracked down and found and interviewed Roy Lewis, a Texas School Book Depository employee who was there actually standing on the front steps November 22nd, 1963, in front of the School Book Depository. He had been an employee with the company for approximately a year and a half by the time of the assassination. He was an order filler like Oswald and Frazier, and he was actually only 17 at the time. That makes him 69 now. He lied about his age to get a job there. And I'm going to put up a link to the entire interview if you'd like to go listen to it, if you'd like to torture yourself. The one criticism I do have of the interview, well, I have a few, and I'll go ahead and tell you them. If you're going to interview a witness as important as Roy Lewis, you don't do it in a crowded, loud restaurant, first of all. I know it's nice. You want to take the guy out to eat? Fine. Take him out to eat when you're done. Okay? But you need a nice, quiet place where you're not disturbed by the waitress bringing food or some asshole crunching potato chips into the microphone. My other criticism of the interview is that it's very edited. As in, Roy Lewis is trying to tell us something, and they just cut it off. It's like they're not letting him finish his thought because it's not something they agree with. Okay, and thirdly and lastly, my criticism of this interview is, of course, they try to shove the whole Oswald in the doorway thing down Roy Lewis's throat. Now, Roy Lewis has no clue where these people are coming from. Okay, so Larry Rivera's got to pull his big old computer out in the middle of the restaurant and sit here and show him some gifs and some overlays and some other manufactured evidence to try and prove to Roy Lewis that Lee Oswald was out on the steps with him. And of course, he ain't having it. He's telling him, look, I didn't see Lee Oswald out on the steps. I'm sorry, I just didn't. And they try to say, oh, but you weren't looking behind you, were you? Well, no. He said, I was focused on the president. So you wouldn't have known if Lee Oswald was standing behind you. They try to do this type of thing to him, which I think is totally wrong. They're trying to contaminate him and trying to get him to say something that supports their theory. When in actuality, this man was standing out there. This man knew he was standing out there with people like Frazier and Billy Lovelady and several other people that he knew and worked with. He said he didn't see Lee Oswald out there, no matter how many stupid gifts and overlays you have to try to get the man to speak. But you ended up cutting him off. You never did get him to say anything about that. And I'd like to hear the unedited version because, they would just cut him off. But I'll let you hear it. I'll put up the link, and you can check it out for yourself if you don't believe me, A couple things from the Roy Lewis interview, and it's why I wanted to do this show today, because if you listen to this show, or you know me online, you know very well how I feel about Buell Frazier. Now, I did a show 99 episodes ago, 99, about Buell Frazier, and that's been approximately a year and a half ago, and there's been some new stuff come up since then. Now, I get a lot of flack online when I start calling Buell Frazier a liar online. I get it from both sides. I get it from lone nutters. I get it from conspiracy theorists. Everybody thinks this guy is always so nice and, laid back and mild-mannered and, why do you have to call him a liar? And this and that. It's so vicious. He doesn't deserve it. Blah, 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 blah. Okay? Look, I'm not making stuff up. I'm not pulling stuff out of thin air. I'm going where the evidence tells me to go. And you know what? With Mr. Lewis coming out and saying this, okay, he merely corroborates, the 4 or 5 other of Oswald and Frazier's co-workers who said that Frazier brought Oswald to work every day. Not just coming back from Irving. I'm talking every day. Every day. Now, the Warren Commission never investigated why or how Lee Oswald got to work normally or home from work normally. And there's a reason they didn't do this. Okay, they talked to everybody under the freaking sun. They had the FBI out, scouring Dallas for people, and things and places. They had Jack Ruby's mother's teeth in the Warren Commission report, okay? But they did not investigate the simple task of how Oswald normally got to and from work. And here's why. I think early on, some kind of a deal was struck with Frazier. Okay? Because, and look, and I'm not saying this because I think Frazier is some sinister, evil dude who, was behind framing Oswald, this, that, and the other. That's not what I'm saying. Okay? I'm saying if I was Frazier, I would have done the same thing. I would have tried to distance myself from Oswald as much as possible. Like, I barely know the dude. Like, he never talks. I don't know nothing about the guy. Blah, blah, blah. But in actuality, if you're giving a man a ride to work every day and a ride home from work every day, the reality of it is is you have a much closer, more intimate relationship than you're letting on. Okay? You have to remember, Frazier's 19 years old. He's impressionable. He's a young guy. Now, Oswald's not much older than him. He had just turned 24. But look, Oswald had already seen the world. He had experienced things that 99% or more of the United States population would never do. Okay? He'd already been to California, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines. He'd already been to Russia. He'd lived in Russia. He'd been to Mexico a few times. He'd been to England, all across Europe to Finland, and into Russia. I mean, this guy had seen the world. He'd been in the Marine Corps. Okay? He had a Russian wife. He would have had a ton of stuff to talk about. And this is not even speaking to his, what he was doing in New Orleans. Okay? I'm just saying, from a standpoint of this, if you're around a guy and he's about your age and you're starting to become friends and you're giving him a ride, you're talking about stuff. You're not just talking about the weather and, boy, isn't that tree pretty, Lee? You're talking about stuff. Frazier would have looked up to this guy because he'd already seen the world and experienced so many cool things, and this would have just stroked Lee Oswald's ego. Now, are we supposed to believe that Lee Oswald, all of a sudden when he got to Dallas, stopped having friends? Stopped seeking friends? Because he'd had them his whole life up to this point, in every stage of it, in the Marine Corps, in New Orleans, growing up, in Russia. He had friends. He did. He just did. He was not a loner by any stretch of the imagination. Yet all of a sudden we're supposed to believe when he gets to Dallas, he just shuts down. And he decides to become an asshole. This psychotic lone nut asshole. I don't buy it. And if Frazier was giving him a ride to and from work, they would have had more in-depth conversations than what we're privy to. They would have had a closer relationship than what Frazier is letting on to have been. Okay? Now, there's allegations whether or not Frazier was actually picking him up from his rooming house on Beckley and bringing him to work. People say, oh, he wouldn't do that. It's too far out of his way. No, it's not. It's actually only 1.25 miles out of his way. 5 minutes is all it would have taken. And that's really not a huge deal. For something, a nice guy. Buell is a nice guy. I'm sure he is. And you see this poor sap Oswald, starting to walk home from work. You're like, hey man, you need a ride? Hop in, dude. That's what nice people did back then. That's what they do now. And Lee, do you have any way to get to work? Oh no, I gotta walk, Buell, or take the bus. Buell's like, man, look, it really is no problem for me to swing by and grab you in the morning, dude. I can do that, no problem. If you need me to. Sure, that'd be great. Okay. Now look, the Warren Commission investigated a lot of stuff. They never investigated how Lee Oswald got to and from work. And if they did, they would have run into probably the morning route bus driver, the afternoon route bus driver, and all of the people that normally rode the bus to and from work. Okay? They would have had contact who would have stood beside or sat beside the assassin of the president. But you never hear from any of these people because they don't exist, because Oswald didn't ride the bus to work and he didn't ride the bus home. Okay, and Oswald normally never, ever took cabs anywhere because they were too expensive. He would have either rode the bus or he would have walked, or he would have caught a ride in with his old buddy Wesley. Okay? Now look, when we get, to the supposed relationship, and look, I'm telling you, Buell's lying, okay? Roy Lewis, you heard it there, and I'm going to play it again real quick because it's only 29 seconds long, And listen carefully to what he says one more time.
That was my concept.
And then he went apart.
And then he went apart, right.
That's right.
Now, that's my concept.
That's right.
But I didn't see any of it. I can't say because I wasn't eyewitness to it. But he put him out in the back. He's always put him out. Now, you said he only rode with him on weekend. He rode with him every day.
Really?
Monday through Friday.
Really? Mm-hmm. We didn't know that.
And he would bring him. But he would let him out in the back door. That's what I'm going to tell you.
That's right.
He would let him out and come in the back together.
There you heard it. There you heard it, right from the man's mouth. Now, we've known about Oswald's other co-workers, and I'm talking about Edward Shields. I'm talking about James Jarman, Harold Norman, who else? Charles Givens. Now we have Roy Lewis, and also Billy Lovelady chimed in on this how Oswald got to work thing. In fact, I'm gonna tell you right now, and I believe this is from an FBI interview with Billy Lovelady. Lovelady stated he did not believe Oswald had an automobile, and had heard that he rode back and forth to work from Irving with an employee named Wesley, last name unknown, who was also an order filler. Okay. That's what we have Lovelady saying on there. And as for Harold Norman, we have the HSCA interviews with all these co-workers, okay? And what's interesting about this is you can tell that these HSCA investigators were on a certain path. And a lot of this questioning surrounded Buell Frazier bringing Oswald to work because they smelt something funny. They knew something was up. Okay? And you can tell from their questioning they're trying to get somewhere with this. Okay? But like with most of the HSCA investigations, you know, when it comes to actually going somewhere and interviewing people or bringing them to you to interview them, or spending any kind of expense, you know, eventually it dries up and they tell you to move on. You know, it happened very often with you know, L.J. Dale, Sagate, and Fonzie. You know, these guys, you know, Day, Maxwell, all kinds of these HSCA investigators, you know, they were, the money just simply was not there to continue what they needed to do and to get where they needed to go. But these guys were on some kind of a path to try to get to Frazier and really clear up this line of questioning. The investigator says, Wes Frazier, the guy that drove Oswald to work, you say, was he friendly with everybody in the place? Norman says, yeah, I think Wesley got along pretty well with everybody in the place. The investigator says, and of all the people in the place, about the only one you think that was friendly with Oswald was Wes. Norman says, well, I would say that, I guess, because he rode to work with him. I don't know how many times he rode to work with him. Okay, and that's not the investigator asking him that, how many times he rode. That's Norman saying he rode to work with him. You know, like, I don't know how many times he rode to work with him. You know, it was too many to count. And another investigator is asking him, who was Oswald's best friend in the building that you could think of? Norman says, well, I don't know of him having one. I don't. The investigator says, do you know the man Oswald came to work with? Norman says, yes. And the investigator said, what was his name? And Norman says, Frazier. Now, Junior Jarman, okay, the investigators asked him, during the time that he was working there, did you ever see him show any type of animosity towards anybody? Jarman says, no, he was just the average fellow to me. Now, they're talking about Oswald there. The investigator says, did you associate with any particular person there? No one really, but I can't think of the dude's name, the one that brought him to work all the time. The investigator says, a fellow that worked with him? Jarman says, yeah. The guy says, well, let me ask you one thing. You said you saw him sometime between 8 and 8:30 that morning for the first time. Wesley? No, I don't even think he's here now. Did they come to work there together? Junior Jarman says, yes, he always brought Oswald to work. Okay. Now we got another one, Eddie Shields. Now Eddie Shields is he worked at the other warehouse mainly. I think they called it State Building. But every morning, Eddie Shields would be down out front, I guess around back there by the parking lot, smoking cigarettes, before he had to go into work. So he would see a lot of things. He would see Frazier arrive to work and park his car. He would see this frequently. Okay, so keep that in mind. Shields says, if I'm not mistaken, I think he rode with Frazier every day he worked there, if I can recall. The investigator says, and earlier you said you recall that Oswald had worked there for 6 weeks? Shields says, he worked there for 6 weeks from mid-October to the November to the assassination. The investigator says, now let me back up a bit. Are you telling me that this fella said that somebody who worked in the book depository, the building down on Elm in Houston, hollered out the window and asked Frazier where was his rider? Shields says, mm-hmm. The investigator says, are you talking about the morning of the assassination? Shields says, I think it was, Mr. Davis. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was. Davis says, and how did you come about this information? Shields says, well, I was down on the floor when they hollered it out and said that the answer he gave them. I don't know. I think he said I dropped him off at the building. Now, whoever was hollering asked him, I don't know. This was the morning of the assassination? Shields says, mm-hmm. The investigator says, so somebody hollered out the window at Frazier and says, where's your rider? And to your recollection, Frazier says I dropped him off at the building? And Shields says, yes. And then Shields says, Wesley Frazier, right, you're correct. The investigator says, all right, he rode to work with him. Shields says, Wesley Frazier, yes. And they would park their car right on Houston Street and get out and walk to the building on Elm Street. Now, that little statement right there corroborates what you heard Roy Lewis say in the clip, that normally Frazier did not park in that way far away parking lot. He normally parked up on Houston Street, up by where it bends around, and him and Oswald would get out of the car and walk into the back of the school book depository. They normally didn't park all the way over on the other side of the building. I think the Warrant Commission figured out it was 2,260 feet from where Frazier parked that morning to the building on Elm Street. That's a freaking hike, man. That's almost a mile, really. So, yeah, that little nugget there, it matches what Roy Lewis said. Okay? And he says, okay, the day of the assassination, did you see Oswald come to work with Frazier? Shields says, no, sir, I didn't. They told me that he let him out of the building. He did not come on the parking lot. You say they told you. Shields says, yeah. Who told you? They? Shields says, Jarman, them, and all them fellas that work down there at that building. Investigator says, all right, this is just, can you tell me a specific person that told you that? So the investigator knows that he's on a little bit of a hot lead here, a trail. Shields says, yeah, I think it was Charles Givens who hollered out there and asked Frazier where his rider was, and he told him, I dropped him off at the building. Yes, sir, that was it. The investigator says, you say he drove him to work. You used to see him in the parking lot. Yes, he come by that parking lot. And did you drive him to work every day that you can recall, or on certain days? Shields says, every day. Every day. Okay? Now, it would seem reasonable, if it was raining that morning. As Buell said in his interviews, as they drove in from Irving, that it was raining, and that's what they talked about. They talked about the raindrops on the windshield. That he would drop Oswald off at the TSBD. I mean, it was a country mile where Frazier parked. Especially if his friend has a package. I know if I was bringing somebody to work and it was pouring down rain or even raining at all, that I would be a nice guy and drop him off at the building. I'm not going to make him walk and lug some package 2,000 feet, in the rain, that's just ignorant. I mean, I have to park my car and walk anyway. So that makes no sense. Okay? Now, the official story, if you're to believe Frazier, is he says that him and Oswald arrived in the employee parking lot, and upon arriving, he tried to rev his battery up, and he was revving the engine up, to try to charge his battery, But if he had just drove in from Irving, that probably wouldn't have been necessary. But as he's doing this, Oswald gets out of the car, gets the package, and supposedly cups it under his right hand, and it extends the length all the way up into his armpit, or directly in front of his shoulder at arms position. Now, this doesn't make sense either, because if Oswald is going to all the trouble to conceal whatever's in this bag, if it is a rifle, okay, why in the hell is Oswald carrying it like a goddamn rifle? Okay? That makes no sense. I would carry it in one hand, like I'm gripping a bundle of sticks. I'm not going to carry it like an at-arms position, like I'm in the military, and march 2,260 feet to the building. That makes no sense whatsoever. If you're trying to hide that there's a rifle in this package, you're not going to carry it like one. That's ridiculous. Okay? And if you've never seen the bag as they're bringing it out of the school book depository, I'm going to put the picture up on tlgpodcast.com. Head over there and check it out. Because this is the bag that they allege that Oswald brought the rifle in to the school book depository with. In this bag, the investigator, Montgomery, it starts as he's holding it down by his belt. Arm fully extended down by his belt. And this bag is sticking up a foot over top of his cowboy hat, which is sticking up a foot over his head. There's no way in hell Oswald could have cupped the bottom of that package and stuck it in his armpit or up by his shoulder. I mean, this thing would have been sticking 2 feet up past his shoulder. All right? I mean, this is how long this package is they brought out of there. Now, Frazier's always maintained that the package that he saw Lee Oswald have was approximately 2 feet long. Now, Oswald could do what Frazier said he did with a 2-foot package, but there is no way that Oswald, with his little T-Rex arms, could have carried this package, unless he was a gorilla, unless he had, his arms went down to his knees. There's no way he could have carried this package the way Frazier said he did, if it was truly that bag that they pulled out of the Texas School Book Depository. Now, a couple things about Frazier that just are weird. And here's the thing, people. Frazier's never had to answer hard questions from researchers. In fact, he's never done an interview with the researchers that I know of. Sure, he's talked to journalists and newspaper guys and TV people in the 6th Floor Museum, but he's always been lobbed softballs and basically asked to recant what his version of events was that day. And I don't know why he's been avoiding researchers so long, it's so hard for so long. There's got to be a reason, okay? He's hiding something. And like I said before, I'm not saying it's sinister, but, he's trying to distance himself from Oswald for a reason, okay? Now, if Oswald did have a rifle in a package that morning, and Frazier knew it, because look, let me tell you something. If you're some redneck from Huntsville, Texas, okay, and you own a rifle and you hunt, your family hunts, then you damn well know what a rifle looks like in a rifle case, whether it's a hard shell case or it's a like a leather bag or cloth bag type case. You know what a rifle looks like in a bag, especially if you own one, especially if you've been hunting for a while. You know what a rifle looks like in a bag. I'm sorry, you just do. Okay, I could buy it if Frazier had just got off the bus from New York City and hadn't ever seen a rifle in a bag before. Okay? But this dude grew up in Huntsville, Texas, 200 miles south of Dallas, Texas, in the sticks, where they hunted. Frazier bought his rifle for deer hunting. Okay? Hunting is normally a family activity. You know, with your dad, your granddad, your brothers, your cousins, your uncles. You know, that's what families do. They go hunting together. He would have been around these rifles since he was very young. And he would have known what a rifle looks like in a bag. Okay? There's not many things that look like a rifle in a bag other than a rifle in a bag. You know what I'm saying? If like me, I grew up, my grandfather, uncle, hunting, and I knew from a very young age what a rifle in a bag looks like. Okay? It's not hard to discern, what my Uncle Larry's got, hanging up or behind the seat there in the truck. I know that's a rifle. Okay? Now, let me see here. Where are we going with this? Yes, the package. So, we have Frazier lying about him possibly knowing Oswald better than what he did, because he's lying about bringing him to and taking him home from work every day, which we have 5 or 6 other witnesses to. This is where the evidence is telling us. Why should I believe one man, okay, who's got a hell of a lot to lose on the line if he's being charged as an accessory to the murder of the president, then 5, 6 other guys who have no dog in this fight other than just saying what they saw that day, and what they heard that day. I'm going to believe these guys. Now, back then, the Warren Commission and the FBI, they weren't really even bothered talking to these African American workers there. If you listen to the Roy Lewis interview, he said the FBI came to his apartment building. Somebody told him he didn't live there, and they left. They didn't even bother knocking on doors to try and talk to him. It wasn't that big of a deal for them. They're not going to listen to what these guys were saying. And he says it blatantly. Do you think it was some kind of a, intimidation thing, or you guys were just ignored? And he says, wasn't no intimidation. I think they just ignored us. And by the time of the HSCA, and you get some of these seasoned investigators who know that something else had to be going on here, and when you start talking to one person and they say something, and then you start talking to another person and they say something, the same thing, and another person and they say the same thing. And look, by the time of the HSCA, none of these guys even work at the depository anymore. They don't hang out anymore. They're not in each other's lives anymore. They have no contact with each other. But they're all still telling the same story about Frazier and Oswald coming to work together every day. I think that's significant. Okay? I do. So why is Frazier lying about it? Look, if Oswald brought a rifle that day to work, and I'm not saying it had to be for a sinister reason, okay, he could have told Frazier, hey, you remember the other day, when that guy brought them rifles in and was, showing them to Mr. Truly, and I told him I had this old World War II Italian rifle, and would they be interested in seeing it? I told him I'd bring it in and show it to him. It doesn't have to be anything more sinister than that. Now, you might say to yourself, well, Frazier should have put 2 and 2 together that, hey, today's the day the president is going by the building, you know what I mean? And here's Oswald's bringing a rifle, or it could have been something to the effect of Oswald telling him, I got my rifle with me. I got to take it to the gunsmith after work and get the site worked on or something. For whatever reason, he could have told Frazier he had a rifle. And then he had it in a bag, so nobody would think bad of him or be scared of it, or whatever the reason may be. Maybe he said, he told Frazier he had it in the bag because he had it apart, and he wanted to keep all the pieces together. I don't know. Okay, but Oswald may have told Frazier that he had a rifle that day. And look, there's a reason I'm saying this, people, okay? Because I'm not just pulling this out of thin air. When Frazier was talking to the HSCA, they found out that Frazier told them that he was put in a lineup with Oswald. Okay, and this is something that's never been out there before. And that Oswald said to him, he said that Oswald told him that he owned Dallas. And that he said to you drove the car. And then they asked him, do you remember anything else about what went on during the lineup? Okay, I mean, that's insane. Because, Frazier's under arrest, Oswald's under arrest. They put them in a lineup together. I can just see them gritting their teeth at each other like, I own Dallas, bitch. And Frazier being like, look, man, you're dragging me into this. I didn't have nothing to do with it. And Oswald saying to him, well, you drove the car. Blah, blah, blah. I could just see that little exchange going on. And then we get this little pristine golden nugget. As Frazier's being interviewed by Moriarty, he says this: no, I didn't know that he'd been caught, referring to Oswald. But I will tell you this. I knew that he hid the rifle. I knew that he hid the rifle. Moriarty says, Frazier said he did. And I said to myself, oh my God, that was the first thing right there on them steps I thought. I also knew that I didn't want to get pulled into this. Moriarty says, Now I will tell you that 2 out of 4 of Frazier's HSCA interview tapes are so badly damaged that they cannot be transcribed or listened to. The other 2 are barely listenable. But there is some interesting tidbits that can be made out. Now, in this little interview, Frazier referred to the military presence in Dealey Plaza and in the depository, which you haven't heard him speak of before either. Frazier lied at the mock trial when he said that Oswald was the only one missing from Truly's roll call after the assassination. And we know that's not true today. There was many people, including Charles Gibbons, not there. We'll get to that. And something I find interesting is that a year and a half ago at the ARC conference in Bethesda, there was a conference goer who was very interested in Prayer Man. Okay? Now, Prayer Man is visible in a couple films from that day, including one called the Darnell film. And many stills or freeze frames from this Darnell film are available online. And in one of them, you can quite clearly see Frazier standing right at the middle of the top of the steps in the entrance to the school book depository. And he is looking in the direction of this so-called individual of Prayer Man. He was shown this photograph and asked to identify who this Prayer Man person is. Is it Oswald? Is it Lovelady? Is it somebody else? Is it a woman? Frazier's standing right there to the left of him. And Frazier wouldn't even say that was even him in the photograph. He wouldn't even identify himself in the photograph, let alone Prayer Man. So you see, when Frazier is hit with some tough things and tough questions, I mean, Frazier even told the Warrant Commission that he didn't see any cops run in the building. And they had to go, Marion Baker had to run right by him. Okay? And this is from the same film, the Darnell film, where you can see Marion Baker running into the building. Goes right by Frazier. You can't see this big dummy in this moon helmet running right by you into the building? I mean, where was Frazier's mind? Or was he so shell-shocked he was, and thinking, oh my God, Oswald had a rifle. I brought him to work. Oh my God, he's standing on the steps just totally oblivious to what's going on around him. Maybe that's possible. And I heard this little nugget from Dave Perry, wrote about it in 2008, that Frazier avoids interactions with folks who thinks that he knew something or helped Oswald that day. Like if you insinuate that to Frazier, he won't talk to you. He won't have nothing to do with you. And Frazier owned a rifle. He owned a British Enfield 303 rifle. He had to know what a rifle in a bag looks like, people. I don't know how to make that any more plain and clear. And like I was alluding to before, if you know somebody and you're friends with them and you're talking all the time, you're riding to work together, you live pretty close together, chances are you might hang out together and do something fun together like this. Maybe go to a rifle range and shoot some guns. Commission Exhibit 3077. In an effort to resolve discrepancies in information furnished by Mr. Slack concerning this incident, Mrs. Slack contacted Mr. Slack during the interview. According to Mrs. Slack, Mr. Slack maintained that Oswald was at the rifle range on November 17, 1963, and that he had been brought there by a man named Frazier from Irving, Texas. Mrs. Slack stated that she felt her husband was confused as to the date when he observed the individuals he believed to be Oswald and Frazier at the range. But he was sincere in the statement he had previously made to the agents of the FBI and during his testimony before the President's Commission. Okay? I don't know how much more plain to make this, people. How much evidence do you need? You want more? I got more. Okay. Back in the summertime, I talked to Miss Francesca Akhtar about a book called The Assassination Tapes. Now, the book is based on this PSE analysis machine that is more accurate than a polygraph, in which Frazier's previous statements that he did right after the assassination that were seen on the news and they were recorded were tested, and he was determined that he was lying about what he's saying to the news and his version of events of what happened. Fast forward 14 or 15 years to the 70s, and he has a private. He can't find Frazier anywhere. It's George O'Toole, former CIA guy. He has contacts, deep contacts, and he cannot find Frazier anywhere. Now, at this time, Frazier's in the military, and he can't find him anywhere. Every time he catches up, Frazier's done moved on to somewhere else. He finally has to hire a private investigator who actually finds Frazier relatively quickly, pretty close to home at Fort Hood in Texas, and contacts him over the phone and records the conversation, and he lies to Frazier and says that he is a newspaper journalist, and that he was just interviewing Frazier for a story, trying to get his little, ask him a few questions and his little version of events, nothing to make Buell, on edge or feel creeped out or anything, but just enough to, get some answers out of him and on tape. And from his recorded statements during this phone interview, the private investigator sent a copy of the recording to George O'Toole, the author of the book. And George O'Toole analyzed this information on the PSE machine and concluded that Frazier was lying. Now, O'Toole's investigator also had a PSE machine, and he was also instructed on how to use it and certified to use it. And he did his own analysis on Frazier's audio, and he came to the exact same conclusion that the author did, independently corroborated that Frazier was lying. And the results are right there in the book, and you can see them with your own eyes. You can see exactly where Frazier was lying. You know, so all these people that support him so much and think he's this great guy, and I'm sure he is now, you know, but look, we all have skeletons in the closet. Okay? Just because you talk to somebody at a convention or somewhere doesn't mean you know them. You might like them, and you might think they're good people, but you don't really know them. You know, and I'm not, like I said before, I can't say this enough. I'm not saying Frazier's some sinister bad guy. Okay? But he was a 19-year-old kid caught up in some big-time bullshit. And chances are he was made to cooperate with the police, or, you know, and he was threatened that they were going to charge him with the murder of the president as being accessory. You know? Because like I said, there's no mistaking a rifle in a bag, people. There's no mistaking it. And they had Frazier right where they wanted him. You know, they even gave Frazier a polygraph examination, to which we don't even know the results, because guess what? They're locked away in the National Archives due to national security. I'm not making it up. You can go to the National Archives right now, search Buell Frazier Polygraph, and I'll put a link to it on TLG Podcast. All you gotta do is click the link and you can see it for yourself. It says it right there in black and white. It's restricted due to national security or personal privacy. And I don't know what could be so personal about Buell Frazier that they would deem his thing restricted. So it's got to be national security. And I can't even begin to speculate on the reasons for that. But it is what it is. I'm not making this stuff up, people. Let's see. Let me make sure where we're at here. Okay. Now let's get back. Let me get back a little bit to Frazier's Warren Commission testimony. Okay. Now, Frazier told the Warren Commission a lot of things. But what I want to focus on here for a second is Frazier eating lunch. Okay? Let me see. Okay, Frazier said, well, stayed on the first floor there for a few minutes and I hadn't eaten my lunch, so I had my lunch down there in the basement. And I went down there to get my lunch and I eat it, and I walked back up on the first floor there. Now, when you came back in the building, you came in the front door, right? Frazier says, yes. Did you go down to the basement immediately, or did you stand around on the first floor? Frazier says, no, sir. I stood around for several minutes there, and then, eventually the ones who hadn't eaten their lunch, some of them had taken their lunch outside. Did other people go down in the basement with you? Frazier says, no, sir, they did not. Ball says, you went down alone, did you? Frazier says, yes, sir. Did you go at any time in the back of the end of the building near the door into the loading dock? No, sir, never did. Perhaps I better ask you to point out on the map where you were. Come over here, please. Okay, you came in back into the building, right? Tell us where you went and what you did. Well, like I said, I came back through there, and here, he's indicating the Commission Exhibit 362, a diagram of the first floor. By coming back through here, you mean you came down the hallway and into the entrance into the first floor warehouse? Right, and you came by Mr. Shelley's office. That's his counter here. After you get in, you get off here. This is his office anyway, right out. I come out around here, where several other people walked around here. Anyway, he goes on, blah, 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 blah. So he says, we left after we stood and talked with some guys there. Some of them had eaten and some of them didn't. Some of them had sandwiches in their hands, and naturally, I felt like eating. And I walked around the bend, and I walked down the steps there, got your lunch, right? Come back up. No, sir. I didn't come back up. I sat downstairs in the basement eating my lunch. I looked at my watch and didn't have but 10 minutes. So I naturally ate faster than normal. So I was eating a couple sandwiches, and I eat an apple or something, and I come right back up, and the people who work there, standing around on the first floor, some of them eating their lunches, others merely talking. Ball asked, "You never went back to work?" Frazier says, "No, sir, we didn't. I didn't work anymore that day." Okay, so here we have this weird thing, okay? Apparently, Frazier had never eaten his lunch in the basement before. Now, there was a lunchroom on the second floor, and I heard Roy Lewis talk about it a little bit. He kind of says we weren't allowed up there. Now, I don't know if he's talking about the warehouse workers or just the black folk who weren't allowed up there. I mean, apparently if Oswald was up there, getting a soda and hanging out in the lunchroom, maybe Lewis is just saying that the black guys weren't allowed, up on the second floor, because this is still before the Civil Rights Act. This is, still when things were a little wonky between blacks and whites back then. So there's that. And I'm wondering where Frazier normally ate his lunch. Because the black guys, they had this domino room down on the first floor where they would normally eat and hang out a little bit. Apparently the white guys got to go up to the second floor lunchroom. But this was the first time Frazier ever went down in the basement. I mean, he just saw the president's head get blown off. And all of a sudden his first thought is, man, I'm really hungry. I need to go downstairs and eat my lunch. And this is after he's standing on the steps shell-shocked. Then he doesn't see Marion Baker run past him into the building. He's just standing there. And we know he's just standing there because he's caught in the Darnell film. He's caught in the Wegman film. Just standing there like a freaking statue on the front steps, arms crossed, in a daze. So why would Frazier go downstairs in the basement and eat his lunch? Well, I just told you before, from the HSCA, that little nugget, I told you. And let me find it again so we can go back over it, because this is important, and I think this is what happened and why it happened. Let me pull it up here. He says, "I knew that he hid the rifle. He did. And I said to myself, oh my God, that was the first thing right there on the steps. I also knew that I didn't want to get pulled into this." Okay, so he's telling the HSC investigator, he's standing on the steps, and he's thinking these thoughts to himself, I knew he hid or had the rifle. Okay? I knew right there on the steps that I didn't want to get pulled into this. So Frazier's mind is already working out on the steps. Okay? He's thinking in his mind already that this is Oswald. This is the guy he brought to work. This is the guy he brought to work with the rifle. Okay? Now, he might be thinking, look, I don't even want to see the guy because he might ask me for a ride somewhere, and I don't want to have to tell him no. I just don't even want to mess with this guy. So you know what? I'm going to the basement where hopefully he won't see me. If he's trying to get out of the building or something, he's going to look around for a second and not see me, and then he's just going to leave. This is probably what Frazier's thinking. Frazier's thinking at this point that he doesn't want nothing more to do with Lee Oswald. So what better place to hide than in the basement? Okay, you sit down there for 10 or 15 minutes and you eat your lunch, and by the time you come back upstairs, everything's done blown over and he's gone. Because in Frazier's 6th floor museum oral history, he lies again. And he tells us he stood out on all them steps and that he watched Oswald leave the building, walked up Houston Street like he left out the back door, walked up Houston Street, across the street to Main Street and around the corner, and disappeared. And he said that's the last time he saw him. But we also know that he was in a lineup with him that night. So that wasn't the last time that he saw Oswald. And we also know that Oswald left out through the front door because he encountered a reporter. It was either Pierce Allman or Robert McNeil, to which he directed to a telephone. We have what they say happened, and we have Oswald in his interrogation saying that, some Secret Service come in, flashed a badge at him or something, asked where the phone was, and he told them. But they were probably just a reporter with a press pass or press badge or something. That story matches. And at this time, of course, Frazier would have been downstairs eating his lunch. He wouldn't have seen Oswald leave the building, either from the front or the back door, according to Frazier's Warren Commission testimony. Okay, so why did he lie again? Okay, I've pointed out umpteen million times that Frazier has lied throughout the years. I don't know how much plainer to make it to people. I mean, what is the evidence telling us? Okay, either Oswald brought a goddamn rifle to work that day in a 3-foot plus bag, and Frazier knew it, or Oswald didn't have a package at all. Because you know what? There was no 2-foot bag found in the Texas School Book Depository. There were no curtain rods found in the Texas School Book Depository. You can't fit a 3-foot plus rifle in a 2-foot bag. Just doesn't happen. Impossible. Impossible. So, Frazier's either lying about the length of the bag, or he's lying about there being a bag at all. Package at all. Because you know what? And I don't blame him. He wants to distance Oswald. He wants to distance himself from Oswald having a rifle. Period. And I can't say I blame the man. But we're 52 years on now. And I hear Bill Frazier is writing a book, finally. And hopefully he'll come clean in it. And if Bill Frazier, if you ever hear this, I hope you do come clean. Because I think you've been carrying around a lot on your shoulders for the past 52 years, my friend. And I think you'd feel a hell of a lot better if you were relieved of that guilt, of that massive burden you've been carrying around for 52 years. Just tell the damn truth, man. If you knew he had a rifle, just tell us. It's not like now they're going to charge you with the murder of anything. If anything happens to you, your family, it's going to be pretty obvious who did it. I think we're far enough on now that pretty much everybody's safe. Because the people that wanted this to happen are dead, long dead. Intelligence agencies are going to still be hiding things that they did back then, because they were doing a lot of illegal stuff too. But as far as the assassination goes, I think you're pretty much safe at this point to go ahead and come clean with the truth. If Oswald didn't have a package at all, tell us. If he had a bag big enough to have a rifle in it, or he told you he had a rifle, tell us. We just need to get to the truth, Bill Frazier is the most pivotal living witness we have. Okay? Because apparently he was around Oswald more than Marina at this period in time. So, like I said, if you hear this and you want to come clean on this show, feel free. You know, we got a few mutual friends. Ask around, because people know how to get in touch with me. Or you can send me an email at thelonegunmanpodcast@gmail.com. You know, I'm all over social media. If you know how to use that, I'm not a hard man to find. Because I got some questions for you I'd like to answer. I'd like the answers to some questions because I don't think you've been asked the right questions over the years. I'd like to look you in the eyes and I'd like to ask you why you lied about certain things. And I want to hear you be a man, and I want to hear you tell me why. Because look, I don't blame you. You're a scared 19-year-old kid being threatened, you know, and asked to sign a confession, you know, by the chief of the Dallas police to the murder of the president. And you're standing up to this dude. You know, you're being given a polygraph. I don't blame you for lying or giving them what they wanted. Nobody does. We'd all done the same thing. You know, nope, I don't know that guy very well. Never talked to him. He's very quiet. Da-da-da-da-da. I feel you. But in the meantime, Mr. Frazier, you've been lying to us, and I believe the evidence is finally going to force you to tell the truth. With that being said, sir, this sumbitch is in the can, beamed up to that satellite, and down to your ears. This is your boy, and down goes Frazier.
Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier!